Okay, it's 6 p.m. It's a regular assembly meeting, and it is October 16th, 2023. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mark,
Here.
Rob,
Here.
Scott. Scott, you are muted.
Here.
Donna. Here. Thomas.
Here.
Bob.
Here. Okay, we have a full assembly this evening, and we're going to swear in our new assembly member after the Pledge of Allegiance. So it's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, Member Newman, it looks like we get you from the neck down and me from the neck up where the cameras are. You're looking full on now, though. So on our agenda tonight, there was a mistake. And instead of doing approval of minutes as the third item, we're going to do the oath of office for newly elected Assembly Member Jay Stanton Gregor, and then we will go back to approval of the minutes. So Clerk Thompson.
Cool.
Is that good, Olivia? Should I make him come up here? Come over here.
Yeah, cool, whatever works.
I'll turn this.
Right.
Too bright, right in your eyes?
All right. It won't be long.
Okay. Is it still, if you stand right here, is it still in your eyes?
It's fine.
All right. Please raise your right hand, Jay. Thank you. Jay, do you solemnly affirm that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Alaska and the ordinances of the Petersburg Borough, and that you will honestly, faithfully, and impartially perform the duties of Assembly Member for the Petersburg Borough, Alaska, to the best of your ability?
I do.
Thank you. I'll have you sign, please.
You bet. Just in the one spot?
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you.
There we go.
You're in.
All right, another seat.
Okay, we have 5 assembly members in the chambers, and we have Member Newman and Mayor Jensen zooming in. So now we're going to move back to the approval of minutes. I'd entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 9th, 2023, our last meeting.
No move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Marsh. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, those minutes pass unanimously. Now we're on to item 5. And that's amendment and approval of the meeting agenda for this evening. I'd entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
Make a motion to approve the agenda and the meeting.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Marsh, seconded by Member Lynn. So if there's no proposed amendments, I don't see any hands coming up. All in favor of moving forward as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll move forward with the agenda as it was presented to us. Item 6 is a public hearing tonight on one item, and that's a hearing for ordinance 2023-14. That's an ordinance amending the official zoning map for Service Area 1 of the Petersburg Borough to rezone lot GL 14, Section 33, Township 58 South, Range 79 East, Copper River Meridian, parcel 01-010-600 from public use to single family mobile home. Anybody in the audience wish to participate in this public hearing? Is there anyone zooming in, Clerk Thompson?
There is not.
Okay, I don't see any interest, so the public hearing is now closed. Item 7 on today's agenda, bid awards. There are no bid awards. Are there any persons in the audience that would like to speak to items related to today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. item 9, and that's persons to be heard unrelated to today's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to items not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none. Board, commission, and committee reports. We have a report tonight from Southeast Alaska Power Agency, and that will be from CEO Robert Seidman, and he will give us a report. So please step to the podium and give us the latest news. Robert, haven't seen you in a while.
Who's yours? Sorry. Okay, let me share my screen real quick here. And
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Robert Seidman, CEO of Southeast Alaska Power Agency as a mayor.
Are you seeing that, Mayor Jensen?
I am not.
Okay, sorry, hang on, Robert. I
Okay.
gotta figure out what I'm doing here. How about now, Mark? No?
I don't see any screen shared.
Oh, here we go. Share. It helps if you hit share. Okay. so-
Oh, yeah. Nice picture.
What?
I'm seeing
Now,
SEPA
can you move it
update
over?
past, present, and future.
You are, okay, perfect. Okay, so let me turn it on. Okay, I think we're up now.
So again, Robert Seidman, been in this position about 3 months now. So bear with me. I've been with SEPA for 7 years though, so I'm very familiar with the agency. Very familiar with Petersburg's needs and Wrangell's needs and Ketchikan's needs for power. What this presentation really is going to be giving you for information wise is where we've been, where we are today and where we're going as an agency and how that impacts our member utilities and your ratepayers in this case. So first of all, for some of you members that aren't familiar with SEPA, I just want to do like a 30,000 foot view of who SEPA is. In this case, start with the region here. So we service the 3 communities, Petersburg, Wrangell, and Ketchikan. We have 2 hydro plants, that's Tidy Lake and Swan Lake. And those hydro plants are connected by 175 miles of transmission line and 12 miles of submarine cables. And we produce about 175 gigawatt hours per year. And that's give or take, it can range from 160 and we have a capacity of about 200, which I'll get into here in a little bit. Just kind of again, 30,000 foot view. We're a joint action agency of the state of Alaska by Alaska statute 4245.300 through 310. Really what this effectively does is our financing is distinct from each member utility. So it shields our member utilities from any impact to finances. For example, if an earthquake were to happen and Swan Lake were to fall, were to break, or Tyee were to fail, our member utilities would not be impacted financially for the debt service that we have incurred for those assets. We're also a nonprofit utility or nonprofit agency. So again, we all know nonprofit. At the end of the day, we build our budgets to make sure that we can get the work done without causing any rate increases as much as possible. Bylaws, because of the Joint Action Agency Agreement, the Alaska statute, we are required to have bylaws. These are basically what's governing our agency. And this governance is really instituted by board members. Our board members are 5 voting board members. There's 10 total. And for those of you that don't know how it works, Ketchikan has 2 board members. Wrangell has 1 board member and Petersburg has 1 board member. There's a 5th board member and that's a rotating board member. So this year, Ketchikan has the 5th seat. Next year, Petersburg will. So next year, Petersburg will have 2 votes. And then following that, you'll have Wrangell and then back to Ketchikan. To finalize kind of the about session here, really the magic in the making for SEPA is our power sales agreement. This power sales agreement is an agreement between the 3 member utilities. It's what binds the agency to the member utilities. That's a mistake on there. That actually expires in 2034. So we don't have to worry about that not this year. But that being said, this agreement really, it's gonna take some time to come to an agreement between the three communities. And so I think we're gonna be looking at, opening that door here in about 5 years. Going over SEPA's mission, our mission really is to safely provide clean, reliable, low-cost wholesale power to the communities we serve. That's the mission, and I put it in the form of a triangle here because really at the base of it is the rock, and that's safety. And you can't put a dollar value on safety. So that is our foundational triangle. The other two is reliability and low cost or affordability. Putting that into another perspective, taking that triangle and saying, okay, if we can't really, we don't want to mess with safety because safety is one of the most important foundations. Really what you have is you have a tug of war between reliability and affordability. I can make the system as reliable as anywhere in the world at a certain cost. So we balance that affordability, reliability. You could have, the lights never go out, but your cost is the most expensive in the world. But then you could also have the lowest in the world and your lights go out every night. So there's this balancing act that we play with reliability and affordability. Going into reliability, we've maintained our rates and our cost very affordable, but we have been as an agency very, very reliable over the years. And the reason why and how we maintain that reliability is one, we have a robust renewable and replacement program. So our program is a forward funding program. It looks out 30 years in the future at our assets, and it determines the cost of the asset replacement and the timing of that replacement so that we don't run to failure. So that increases reliability, but not running to failure. You also are able to keep the rates lower because you're not in an emergency state. For all of us that know emergencies, it's typically twice the cost, sometimes 3 times the cost when you need it now. So we look forward funded. We look to replace assets when they need to be replaced prior to them failing. Excuse me. We also maintain reliability by our self-insured risk fund. That's a fund that we actually used recently for the Petersburg submarine cable project. When we had a failure in 2019, we would have had to gone out for bonding. We did go out and bond and incur debt service as a result. But we would have to wait for the bond to come in. So that cable would not have been purchased immediately. By having this self-insured risk fund, we were able to purchase that cable immediately, have it in the manufacturing process, and then we were able to get that delivered and installed within 18 months, where typically it's 3 to 5 year project. So that's another way that SEPA maintains reliability. As a result, we've really only had 2 rate increases in over 20 years. And those rate increases have been just very recent. And so that's actually really impressive that by maintaining reliability and not being in an emergency state and spending 2 to 3 times the amount for every asset replacement, we're able to maintain very low rates. In fact, the lowest rates in the state of Alaska. With that being said, this has been a really good year. We've had more revenues this year than anticipated. I think partly due to the Blind Slough project. We're able to provide those needs to Petersburg. So those have been some revenue. We've also had some load growth, which I'm going to go into. So we've had increased revenues from load growth. And then there's some other nuances. This year was a great fish year as far as numbers go. So that means there was a lot more power to be consumed. And so there was quite a bit of revenues from that as well. So with that being said, I don't see or anticipate a rate increase in 2024. Going back to the last 5 years, I'm going to go over like a few major projects that we completed, and these are really focused on that reliability aspect. First of all, the Swan Lake, for those that don't know, this is the Swan Lake Arch Dam. About 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we did a dam raise project, and this dam raise project actually took the elevation from 330 feet and raised the dam up to 345 feet. So that was about a 15-foot increase in storage capacity. With that storage capacity, the agency gained about 12 gigawatt hours per year. doesn't sound like much, but is actually quite a bit. It would be about half of a new hydroelectric project. This is what we gained just in this. So with that, in terms of yearly revenues, increased our revenues about $1 million a year. And that return on investment, it was about a 10-year ROI. So that's what we consider low-hanging fruit. That is something that we were able to do, increase reliability and outputs. And there it is. And it with minimal cost. Another key one, I mentioned it a little bit, the Petersburg submarine cable project. So in order to get power to Petersburg, we have to go underwater 3 different times. So 2 different islands and then finally to Mitkoff. There's 3 crossings, and one of the crossings between Warnoski and Vank Island, we had a failure. That crossing is about 3 miles long. So that cable goes down to approximately a depth of 700 feet. The cable actually failed at about 300 feet below the surface. And when it failed, it separated completely, which meant it wasn't repairable. It had to be replaced. We think it was caused by an underwater avalanche. It's like a cornice on the snow on a mountain where you get a lot of, you get a kind of a cornice cliff. We think that let go. This is what we provided to our insurance company. It was inspected, and that's really the end result. So this is a really interesting project. The underwater cable, the new cable weighed about 600,000 pounds. So it's not something that we can just put on any boat, at least not in Southeast Alaska. That cable came from Japan, and with the old cable, we had to remove it. With the weight from the old cable and the new, we were over a million pounds on this boat. So it was quite heavy. In order to handle 1 million pounds of not just removal of the old and installation of the new, there had to be a specialized turntable. And you'll see that turntable here on this barge. This is actually, as the cable's being removed, this is turning and it's going in the center there. And that is actually an oil containment reservoir. On the outside, you'll see here is the new cable. To replace the new cable, we really had to have real accurate measurements. We need to know, by pretty much within a foot of where we wanted to put it on the bottom, we needed to know where we were. So this barge was actually equipped with a dynamic positioning system on it. So within inches of where they wanted to lay the cable, the boat was there. A couple of other aspects to this cable was put some fiber optics in it in the event that we want to actually add fiber optics between Ketchikan, Petersburg, and Wrangell on the SEPA system. We didn't want to, it was minimal cost to put fiber optics into this cable. Another thing is we doubled up the armor. The old cables had single armor on them. These ones have double the armor, so twice as strong. Obviously, we experienced that underwater avalanche, but we've had earthquakes here in the past. We want to make sure this thing was robust, and it was really at a fraction of the overall cost. I think it was like 1% adder. So it's totally worth the investment on the double armor. And with those, with that dynamic positioning on that barge, we have minimal span. So 99.9% of that cable is laying on the bottom. There is no spans where it's hanging between 2 rocks or cliffs or anything like that. It's laying completely on the bottom. That increases reliability pretty significantly. This was such a good project. It was featured in Transmission and Distribution World. It's a worldwide magazine that features anything that are specialized. So it was a very, very special project for SEPA and for Petersburg. Some more reliability projects is Swan Lake. We just recently replaced their station service switchgear. It's double-ended. It's auto start, black start features. So if the lights go out and it goes dark at Swan Lake, it'll automatically start the diesel generators, turn the lights on so the operators can restore the system. I bring this one up because this was recently done at Swan Lake. 40 years of service. There was some breakers that were stuck and they were starting to fail. So we replaced this at Swan Lake, and this is actually being designed exactly the same. It's tidy right now. Another reliability aspect is the tiny tunnel inspection. Tiny Lake Tunnel is a lake tap. So there is no dam. It's pretty much a mine shaft that goes through the mountain, goes up to the lake. Then we blew the lake and filled it full of water. When they did that in 1984, everything worked perfect, but they had to go inspect it. So they had to see what was down in there. At that time, they didn't have ROVs, remote operated vehicles, that can make that kind of a dive. So they dewatered the tunnel and it collapsed. And when it collapsed, they had to go back in. And this is an actual three-dimensional image of where it collapsed. When we did our ROV inspection, we were able to go and see, is there any other additional issues in the tunnel? How's the concrete holding up, for the collapsed area? We're also able to create an unwatering plan. So in the future, when we do have to unwater, we've got a solid plan for it. But consequently, Tiny Lake has never been unwatered because of that. No need to unwater it now, especially with ROVs. But the only thing that we may need to reason to unwater it would be to potentially put in like a third turbine, which we'll talk about that here in a minute. This actually was a world record for the deepest and longest ROV dive in a tunnel. It's a pretty high pressures. Tiny Lake's at 1,400 feet, so it's like 700 PSI. And for a drone, it's really hard for them. But then it's also 8,500 feet deep in length. So you've got a long tether to get down this tunnel to try and inspect it. So it's a pretty good project, world record, and it gave us a lot of good information about the Tiny Lake Tunnel. And then finally, one of the maintaining reliability projects we did just recently was transformer refurbishments. We went through and we've been doing oil testing on all our transformers, and we found that internally they're in excellent condition. But after 40 years plus, you can see on the left-hand side, they're starting to get dilapidated. And this project was to really go through and refurbish them. By doing so, we end up increasing the life on them 15 to 20 years. So instead of capital expense within the next 5 years, we're able to get another 15 to 20 years out of them. This is done so by adding new seals, gauges, bushings, and paint. And like I mentioned, 15-year life extension. So I really want to get into now is those are some projects that we're talking about reliability and how we're maintaining reliability. The question is where are we going here in the future? And to know where we're going to be here in 5 years, we need to really look at where we are today. So looking at this is a trend analysis. This is a year in the life of SEPA for 2022. And this is a typical duck curve for those that know power. You'll see that during the summertime, the loads are low, and in the winter, the loads are high. This right here on the side is a megawatt peak. So it's a horsepower outputs, and this is your months. What you'll see here is we have a capacity, SEPA's total capacity is about 48 megawatts. But in 2022, the lows reached 65 megawatts. So that meant Petersburg, Wrangell, Ketchikan, we were all burning diesels in order to meet the peak, the remainder of the peak demand. You can really see that here in December. So there was a small stint in November and January, but really in December, there was quite a long time frame there that we were up above that 48 megawatts, and all three communities were burning diesel. So there's two parts to this. There's horsepower, and then there's actually the fuel in the tank, or the capacity. In this case, SEPA has on average a total capacity of 200 gigawatt hours. And that's about 120 gigawatt hours, 120 to 130 at Tyee, and about 80 at Swan Lake. So a total of 120 or 200. We dispatch 175, 180. I anticipate maybe even hitting 185 next year gigawatt hours. And this is all a function of load growth. And we'll see that in the next slide. But what you'll see here is even though we dispatched 180 gigawatt hours, you'll see we spilled a lot of energy right here. This orange line, that's SEPA's spilled energy. So that was about 20 to 30 gigawatt hours in a plant. If we were to install a new hydro facility at about a 30 gigawatt hour capacity, you'd be between 50 and 100 million. So this shows that we still have quite a bit of capacity left. We still have a lot of water on average, right? We don't consider the drought in this case, but on average, we have a lot a lot of water still in the tank. But what we do have a problem is the horsepower. So when you look at horsepower, when I mentioned earlier is 48 megawatts is what we have on our system. You'll see here that red line really delineates where SEPA's total existing horsepower is. And in 2023, we did a load growth study. We've been seeing over the past year, 5 years or so, about 2.5% to 5% increase in horsepower out peaking loads, not only in Petersburg, but across the board, really in Ketchikan and in Wrangell. So this load growth study was really focused on a few aspects, but mainly it was focused on load growth due to heating loads. What we're seeing is about a 2.5% increase year over year, and that's continued. That forecast is going to continue to grow. And the reason why it's happening is in a study was done in 2016, and they found that about 72% of Southeast Alaskans burned oil for heating. It was heating fuel. That number has actually been reduced from 72% to about 50%. So we came down about 22% in the amount of heating loads and converted that to electric loads. We still have 50% to go. That's a lot. So we've got a lot of heating load conversions that are going to be occurring here over the next 30 years. But really, over the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be more impactful to all three communities. Again, looking at now from the other aspect is not just the horsepower perspective, but the capacity or the fuel we have in the tank. This is the lake, the water in the lake. Load growth on that really hasn't been all that much, about 0.5% a year. And we're forecasted to see that kind of continue at that rate, about 0.5% a year. There's a couple reasons for that. One is population is either going to stay stagnant or potentially decline. But electric conversions are going to increase. So we're going to see a balancing act there. What the load growth study really effectively was showing is that loads in the summer are going to reduce, but the winter loads are really going to increase. With that being said, you can see from this chart, when I mentioned we spill, this is our total capacity here, the red line. And really, if we were to add a 30,000 megawatt hour hydro to the system, we're looking out there quite a ways. Even if we had a really small one at 10,000, we're still looking out there closer to 2040 before we'll meet the availability, the output availability of the hydro and actually meet the loads of the consumers. So we don't want to, the timing is key here. If we're going to invest in a new hydro, timing is absolutely key. You don't want to invest too early because then you'll have a stranded asset, no loads. You're not really displacing any loads. You're just displacing existing hydro. So the timing is key on this. So anticipated, we don't really necessarily need a hydro until 2032. And at that point, it would still be stranded. So you're looking more like 2042 to 2050 before you really want to start looking into a new hydro. In this case, it would be a 30,000 megawatt or 20,000 megawatt would be stranded still out there towards 2054. Now there's two parts to this graph right here I want to get into. The load growth study, not just focused on heating load conversions, it also focused on potential other loads that are coming out. In this case, you'll see the green there. That's a dock electrification. Ketchikan has six docks there that the cruise ships are potentially going to want to electrify. Wrangell's talking about doing the same thing. Those cruise ships are between 5 and 10 megawatts each. And what that potentially could do is instead of waiting until we're burning diesel at 20 to 30,000 megawatt hours a year, we could have interruptible load agreements with cruise ships and grow into that hydro at our pace instead of having a stranded asset and costing our ratepayers. So there's some great potential there. Stay tuned with that. That's really going to depend on the market and what the cruise industry is doing. But there's a green corridor up and down the West Coast, and there's maritime laws that are coming in that may force them to do this. With that, then there may be increased loads on the system. So how do we meet, especially with our horsepower? I mean, I kind of showed there that we don't have a necessarily capacity problem when we're spilling 20 to 30,000 megawatt hours a year, but we do have a horsepower problem. That horsepower problem is going to be either have to be met by increased diesel at all three communities, or a potentially a project out at Tyee. So this project is a potential way to address much of that horsepower need, and this would be a Tyee third turbine project. So Tyee was built in 1984, but it was built with provisions for a third unit. Right now it has two. It could potentially have a third unit. This is very similar to Kodiak, Alaska. They had a sister project, very, very similar to Tyee, had the third turbine bay. They went through in 2014, I believe. They put in the third turbine, and it's made a world of difference for them. But what a third turbine at Tyee would effectively do is increase horsepower by 50% at Tyee, 25% on the SEPA system. This would do two amazing things other than meeting peak loads. This would increase our contingency. And what I mean by contingency is SEPA only has 4 generators, and for 6 months out of the year, we're using all 4. If one of them failed, there would have to be diesels to replace the hydro. So we have no contingency in that matter for about 6 months out of the year, and that's going to continue to increase. But it also increased resiliency. So by adding a third turbine, we're going to increase what we call spinning inertia. We're going to increase the ability to handle faults. We're going to increase the ability to handle a tree hitting the line and be able to ride through that a lot better than to be less stable. So a third turbine at Tyee would also increase resiliency on the system. Again, similar to the Swan Lake dam race project. This would I consider another low hanging fruit. The cost to do a third turbine at Tyee would be about twice the cost of the Blind Slough project, but it would give you about 6 times the output. So it's kind of that low hanging fruit area that SEPA is looking at right now. The last project that we're potentially going to have to look at is delivery resiliency. Right now, Petersburg has a capacity for about 50% more loads that SEPA could provide you through your transformer, if we had the generation to do it. So your transformer in Petersburg is sitting pretty good. But looking around the rest of the SEPA system, Wrangell was out of capacity. In 2022, we had to run those transformer in Wrangell to 115% to meet their loads. And within the next 5 years, they will have to run diesels, even if we have additional outputs, without changing that transformer. And Ketchikan is also out of capacity. In both spots, we're looking at about 100% increase needed for their transformers. So that's something that's also on the horizon. Again, this will increase contingency. For Wrangell, I discussed earlier, we have a robust R&R program, so forward funding program. Wrangell's transformer is already in that program. So we would move that project forward really at no cost to the agency, just moving that around a little bit. Ketchikan transformer, increasing that would take a new substation. So that would be outside of our R&R program. And that is pretty much all I have right now. I'll open it up for questions, discussions.
Robert Lee, for our assembly here, that the graph you had there showing our peak loads, that's the one that has both Carl and I, from Petersburg perspective, really worried, because we can't support, from Petersburg perspective, we can run all our generators and we can just barely meet the needs. And so all SEPA's providing plus all our generator capacity, we can do that for a period of time, maybe for a 2-week period. But if one of those generators go down, then we're at the point in the community, we're going to have to decide, how power is going to be distributed and how it's going to be done. There's some serious things to be looked at there. The other point I want to make is that Ketchikan and Wrangell are both in the same boat we are with the generator capacity. And when we approved here a couple of weeks ago, to get it for a new generator looking and Carl laid out all the costs. That helps us significantly with this, when this occurs, and it will occur this winter again, I'm sure of it.
I'm sure, I'm sure.
Yeah. And the other point I want to make is that Robert talked about it, but if you'll notice, our peaks are not in the summer, our peaks in the winter. So there are opportunities to utilize some of that for, some of that power that can be produced for the cruise ships and other uses. The money generated from that, which we're not getting now, can come back into the community because that helps pay for the infrastructure, for replacement things that Robert's talking about. And that's one of the things that he and his staff are looking at now in some detail, is to see what we actually can do and still maintain the reservoirs such that we can make our loads in the wintertime. And there's a balancing act here that they're fussing with right now. If you
Do
would,
you mind if I add a little bit?
go ahead.
Okay, so, and that's absolutely right. The graph before that, it was showing that, about 1 month out of the year that we would need, and this is 2022 actuals, about 1 month out of the year, but you'll see in 5 years from now, you're looking at four months out of the year. And then it's gonna be 5 months, but you're really gonna be right here in that October to March timeframe, November probably to March. So you're gonna be about 5 months out of the year where we're gonna need additional outputs. And so looking at how to maintain those, we could do it with diesel, but that's expensive, right? So hydro is cheaper, especially when we're talking low hanging fruit hydro. Not when we're talking a new facility. We're talking about adding a third generator at an existing facility, utilizing the spill that we already have, because we're wasting water. When we spill water over the spillway, that could be generated outputs. That could be sold to Petersburg and Wrangell, displacing diesel and Ketchikan as well. So
I guess one last point is to give things more perspective locally. If we're running the generators, our rates go from, I don't remember exactly what we're paying right now, 9 cents a kilowatt, but to use the difference, about 9 cents a kilowatt hour versus when we go to generator capacity, our ratepayers are paying over 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So it makes a world of difference here for our ratepayers.
And I think that's going to continue to get worse as fuel prices go up. So right now, you're about 5 times the cost when you run your diesels versus what you purchase them from SEPA. But as fuel costs go up and volatility, we're seeing, we've got new wars coming out. Who knows what that's going to bring? But fuel prices have been super volatile. And the reason why SEPA really exists in the first place is Alaska took the initiative, our forefathers, to invest in 4 dams with oil monies because of the volatility of the oil market at the time. This is 1978 when they started this process. The projects were complete in 1984, but SEPA used to be the 4 dam power pool, owned Kodiak, Solomon Gulch, Tyee, and Swan. And then we divested in 2009 and just regionalized the Southeast here. Kodiak bought their project, Solomon Gulch bought their project, but it made sense because it was too geographically isolated. But the only reason why we have the cheapest power in the state, because our forefathers had the foresight to invest in something that wouldn't be as volatile. The volatility is going to continue, and I think it's going to get worse.
Well, thank you, Robert. Hey, Clerk Thompson, can you unshare the screen so I can see the assembly chambers, please? Perfect. Was that all right with you, Member Newman? I think we've seen the graphs, and you're muted, Scott, but
Yeah, I'm new to this, but I can see the assembly chambers again.
okay, all right. And Robert, you made a comment that Ketchikan, since they're one facility, and then Wrangell and Petersburg share the other facility, when you have voting members and alternates, it goes, Ketchikan gets an additional one, so they'd have 2 voting and 2 alternates, or would it be 4 and 4? But anyways, on my mayor's report, we were going to advertise for 2 voting members and 2 alternates for Petersburg, but is it Ketchikan's turn again? Did Wrangell have the additional voting board member last year?
No, Ketchikan has it this year, so Petersburg would have it next year.
Okay, well, we need to.
In
remind-
2024.
2024, there'll be 2 voting members and 2 alternates in Petersburg.
Okay, that's what I meant, upcoming year. Right, so we are advertising correctly then. For 2 voting members and 2 alternates for this year's board from Petersburg.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, thanks for the presentation. I was aware of a lot of it, but the third turbine's been kind of an idea and that has been kicking around for years, but it looks like it might even be a better idea currently.
Mayor, there are some questions from the assembly here.
Member Marsh.
Thank you. So in our recent activities, the borough has contracted with an agency to determine our housing needs. And some estimates are upwards of 300 new homes. I think 186 is more like the new homes and the others are in the refurbishment remodel stage. What effect would this kind of growth in Petersburg have on the capacity and or the horsepower? You're talking about the capacity growing at 0.5% a year. And I don't know if that would be a setback or would be a difficult hurdle to provide the power for that, to say 186 new homes.
So if I may, I'm not quite sure what study got 186 homes, but McKinley Research Group, which is formerly McDowell, they're estimating that the population growth isn't going to increase all that much. And really, load is a function of population, not necessarily number of homes. How many people are in the homes? How many people are using the power? How many hot showers are being taken a day? Those kind of things are really driving the load growth. As far as the number of homes, that will increase the required outputs, the demand. But you're also going to see over the course of the next 5 to 10 years that the electric conversions, and some of these conversions are going to be from electric baseboard heaters to heat pumps. So the heat pumps are coming out now where they're DIY. I can go down to my local hardware store, pick up a heat pump, and it's all charged. Everything is charged up. I just plug them in, and then all I need is to have an electrician wire it up. Fortunately, I know one. So it's we're seeing a lot of those go into homes right now from a DIY perspective, and some of them are going in from baseboard heating. So the load growth study took into account all of these aspects, not just electric load conversions, but also some of them are going to get less demand because they're going to convert from electric baseboards to heat pumps as well. But overall, the overall growth is going to be approximately 2.5% per year, and that adds up pretty quick if you think about it. It doesn't sound like much, but 2.5% in 10 years, from our perspective, is a lot.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Robert? Okay, thank you, Robert, for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, moving down the agenda, that brings us to the mayor's report. And like I just was talking to Robert about, we're seeking letters of interest from citizens who wish to serve the community as a board member to the Southeast Alaska Power Agency for the calendar year 2024. Petersburg has 2 voting seats upcoming year on the SEPA board and 2 alternates. So letters of interest should be submitted to Clerk Thompson at the Borough office located at 12 South Nordic Drive, or by sending them to Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska 99833, or emailing to dthompson@petersburgak.gov. The deadline for letters of interest is Monday, November 13th, 2023, and the assembly will make appointments at their November 20th, 2023 meeting. So that is it for the mayor's report today. So Manager Giesbrecht, I see you don't have a written report today. Do you have any new news for us this evening, or?
Nothing really. So we're good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to item 15, unfinished business. There's one item under unfinished business, and that's the second reading of ordinance 2023-14. This is the same ordinance we had a public hearing on earlier in the meeting, And that changes some zoning on some parcels, and I won't repeat the definition. So I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its second reading.
So move.
Seconded.
Motion made by member Lynn, seconded by member Fine Walsh. Any discussion? Member Fine Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose an amendment to this ordinance. I still support the gist of it, but I do want to add some clarification on the definition of manufactured home and how it relates to what we're trying to accomplish here as a community. I believe everybody has a copy of the ordinance with the amended language in front of them. Basically, I can kind of walk us through it, but what I want to do is add a condition to the rezoning whereby with the consent of the property owner and consistent with the property owner's development plans, the principal permitted uses on lot G14 would be restricted to one family, two family dwellings, as already defined in PMC 19.04 210 and 240, and also manufactured homes. Mobile homes that do not meet the definition of manufactured homes that's set out here would be a prohibited use. This would then necessitate the creation of a definition for manufactured homes, which does not currently exist in our code. So manufactured homes for the purpose of this rezoning would be defined as followed: transportable factory-built dwelling units constructed after June 15, 1976 in conformance with the federal manufactured home construction and safety standards, as evidenced by an affixed certification label in accordance with 24 CFR 3280.11. This language, the definition of manufactured homes, is very similar to that used in Anchorage and in many other communities in Alaska, and is pretty standard. And to my understanding, is acceptable to the Boroughs and is in conformance with their project and their plans for this piece of land.
Okay, do we have a second to that motion to add that language to this this ordinance?
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made by member Fine Walsh to add some language to this ordinance, and which he just explained to us, and it was seconded by member Marsh. Discussion on the amendment. Member Marsh, and then member.
Thank you. So it puts a parameter of June 15, 1976 in conformance with federal standard there. I don't know. And it seems to, and then this amendment, it seems to be applying specifically to this project. To me, that is, I'm going to toss it out there, a little short-sighted on its comprehensiveness. Because if we're going to change the language for this project, I think we need to change language so that it's applicable to all the zoned areas of single-family mobile homes. So I don't know if the proposed language here encompasses that.
Okay, member Fine Walsh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can offer a couple clarifications here. And I may ask Liz Cabrera to jump in here because this caused me a lot of confusion initially as well. The June 15, 1976, if I'm correct, is not actually, is not a cutoff date, or is that part of the statute? Can you explain? Yeah,
It's, actually, I had told you that it's part of the title of the statute. It's actually, the date that the statute went into effect. So prior to that, manufactured homes were called mobile homes, and they actually were not regulated under any kind of, building code. So when this act passed, it took a couple of years for it to go into effect. And then after that is when the definition manufactured home, and they actually were built to a certain, what's called the HUD code standards. Then they actually had a building code for manufactured homes. So that's why that's kind of a standard year in there. And a lot of different definitions in different communities. You know, it's the benchmark for what becomes a manufactured home.
thank you. And to address your other question, this is this is limited to kind of the instant issue here that we're dealing with the Skylark development. And I think, I see what you're getting at. I agree that it would be preferable to have a global update to the code and to how we define these issues. But I also don't want to, I don't want to upset areas that are already zoned mobile home. And I think further down the line, it may be necessary, to go in and update our code and maybe reassess, which areas do we want to create after having created this new definition, where do we want it to apply? But I see no reason why we can't address that, at any point kind of down the line. And that's, something that it's difficult to kind of insert that into this process here because it's something that the community would probably want to weigh in on. This is rezoning and kind of determining uses across the community is a very sensitive issue, as everyone knows.
Member Lynn?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. On that night, in 1976, when that code was rewritten, does that then allow for any homes that were manufactured after that date? In other words, the standards have changed so that we've ratcheted it up. So a home, for instance, that was built in 1976 would probably not could not be equated because of the standards then versus the standards today. Are those standards changed, Liz?
I believe they have. They've improved over time and HUD has increased some of the requirements. In fact, they are still doing that and still looking at, for instance, improving insulation values for Alaska specific. Right now, we're just included as one of the northern states, but I think they're actually trying to do something specific for Alaska too. So it is constantly an evolving process. So I'll just make the leap. If you wanted to ensure that something was newer than 1977, let's say, then you would have to specify that in this ordinance as well.
So for instance, if we wanted use an example is that we went through last year where our building code, we went from 80 pounds per square foot, I think, load to 150. I think that's what it was. And so any mobile home or any manufactured home would brought in after 76 wouldn't even begin to meet those requirements.
I can't really speak to exactly what the difference is, but what the IRC is, which is our building code, it's not related to the manufactured housing code. So, if you're trying to make an apples to apples comparison there, it's two separate codes developed in two separate ways. So they don't interact. But having said that, I'm sure there are changes between what was originally passed and what's currently the standard,
Okay, and if you were to put a date on it, what would you do? Would you put 2020, 2023? What if you were to, and why?
Put me on the spot, but I probably would not put a date. I think what I would do if I were writing the ordinance is put either newly constructed, so whatever came in was new that year, whether it's this year or 20 years from now, or put in something like no older than 3 years from the current date. So you never had something coming in that was older than 3 years from that time period. So 20 years from now, you're bringing something in, it wouldn't be 2023, it would just be 3 years old at the most.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on this amendment? Member Marsh?
So two things. With the language in this amendment as proposed, essentially, if I understand correctly, we're just buying time until such time as we can adjust the code definition to apply to the more specific language. And secondly, if we want to include language that gives us a time frame, as Director Cabrera suggested, that it has to be, within 3 years, that is a little more specific. I don't know if the assembly has interest in amending this amendment to put a little more tighter boundary around it or not, but as I understand it, that it's buying us time as is on the amendment.
Member Pine Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe, most importantly with this is not just buying us time, it's also establishing the development in the Skylark subdivision would conform to either residential two-family dwellings or manufactured homes. Mobile homes would be off the table if we were to go forward with this. And I think that's what we're trying to accomplish here, as opposed to sort of putting this project on hold while we revisit the zoning policies here in town. We can do it for this piece of property. I believe planning and zoning are also talking about covenants that would run with the land when they're sold, and also restrictions on the use that would go along with the development. And all of these would, be consistent with the goals of the project as understood. Let's see, that's oh, the other, I wanted to address the issue of time, when are these built? I was kind of back and forth on whether or not it was important to include this in the language. My conversations with Amber Burrell, it sounds like it's pretty unusual for manufactured homes to be moving, especially when they've been in place for a few years. So the chances of, some manufactured home from 1986 getting on a trailer and showing up in this lot, I think are incredibly slim. If anything, this type of language, I think it's an issue better visited when we go back in and potentially tinker with the definition of mobile home, which is another issue I think we can revisit another time. Those tend to be, a little bit more mobile, and it's maybe more important to have a date there. That said, I do have language, defining manufactured homes as newly constructed manufactured homes, where the definition would be a newly constructed manufactured home constructed by the manufacturer no more than 2 years prior to placement of the home on the rezoned parcel. So that would accomplish, if people are interested in language, if that's going to be a deal breaker for this, that language is totally acceptable. And that's, we've discussed that with Liz Cabrera, and we have that here. So that's, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Member Stanton Gregor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'll be, as Mr. Fine Walsh touched on, if is the will of the assembly to change that language, I'm fine with that. But I think putting a definition of manufactured homes on this was wise and prudent. I think it's a reasonable amendment, and to the motion as a whole, which we'll address, I really want to see this project succeed. And if this is this language is going to help that along, I'm definitely in favor of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Another thing to consider instead of getting hung up, I know this is the second reading, we have one more reading. There could be amendments made at that that reading of this ordinance as well. If a person feels that you want to have more specific language in it, like Director Cabrera suggested. So we have until November 6th, I think, to come up with other language. But I'd like to, I support this amendment. There were some concerns raised about the type of building that was, or structure that would be put on this piece of property. But I think it's important that we try to move this forward, and we do have another chance to modify this ordinance again if this amendment passes. Clerk Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. So Tom, if you want to, and if Donna as the seconder of the amendment is willing, if you want to just amend your first amendment to add the language that you just read about the newly constructed and the 2 years. And if Donna as the seconder says that's okay, we'll just call that all one amendment, if that's all right with you guys.
That works for me.
Okay.
Okay, so that language will be added to the amendment as read originally. So any more discussion on the amendment to the main motion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Scott? You're muted, Scott.
You're muted.
Yeah.
I think I'm reading your lips as yes, but.
There, I got you.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. Thomas,
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, we're back to the main motion as amended. Any discussion on it? We just seeing none, will the clerk call the roll on the ordinance as amended?
Donna,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes. Okay, the ordinance passes as amended in its second reading. That brings us up to new business. And Petersburg Borough and Alaska Mental Health Trust possible land exchange. Vice Mayor Lynn requests the Assembly consider directing Manager Giesbrecht to contact the Alaska Mental Health Trust Land Office regarding a possible land exchange in which the borough would acquire a 4.46 acre parcel on the banks of the Blind Slough Rapids, owned by and currently being offered for sale by the land office for $102,500 in trade for other borough property. A link to the land sale is on the agenda here, and I guess for discussion, I'll entertain a motion to move forward with this.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by member Lynn, seconded by member Marsh, and the manager Giesbrecht, before we get started on the assembly part of the discussion to, and you're probably all aware of this, talk about the conversation he had with a person from mental health today. Land trust office.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I reached out to a lady that I had spoken with prior to the development being pushed forward and asked her to forward it to whoever. She actually got back to me pretty quickly. The likelihood of doing a land exchange is almost zero at this point because it's already been issued for sale. Well, I can read exactly what she said. The parcel is currently listed on our annual land sale, so the borough is eligible to bid directly on this parcel. I won't say we never conduct negotiated sales or even trades. However, it is not common and would need to be in the best interest of the trust. She did add on the phone that because there's only at this point one parcel in Petersburg for sale, that they would be very reluctant to take it off the market or do any kind of a trade at this point. So she really pushed it from the standpoint, if the borough's interested, we should buy it. So anyway, that's the information I got from the trust representative today.
You know, after go ahead, member Lynn.
Go ahead. You were,
I was just gonna say, maybe it'd still be in our best interest since you had, this was a phone conversation you had, and I'm sure you remember the content of the conversation, but if we still send them a letter, then we could get something back, email, something in print from them. So we have this information. I don't know if that's necessary. It was just a thought to
Yeah,
continue
Mayor,
along.
actually, what I was reading was an email from her.
Oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
there you have it. Member Lynn.
yes, thank you. Reason I brought this up is because there's been quite a number of folks that have really both have contacted me and talked about this one. That particular parcel has the outjetting of the rocks on the end of that covers it, is part of the access going down from the rapids, across Forest Service down to the rapids going on down Blind Slough. It covers, that parcel covers at a 14.7 foot tide. So if it became private property and somebody cut you off, if that tide is at least a 14-foot tide, you can't get back. You're not going to get back and forth without going on that private property. And that was one of my concerns on that. And if I could, there's 4 other parcels along that same stretch, but this is the one that's kind of the critical one for access for public. And if I could ask Director Cabrera, I don't think below that or above that, there is public access easement on that particular piece of property.
can't give you a definitive answer because we haven't gotten a definitive answer from the trust either. So, usually when the state of Alaska disposes of property, they put a public access easement 50 feet above the high water line. But I don't think the trust is required to do that. And it depends on when the trust got that property and how they got that property on whether that access is there. And I think they're the ones that have to answer that question. So that it's a question mark because when people have called and asked, they haven't been able to give them a clear answer. So unclear on whether that access exists or not.
Thank you. And I've had this, got the same, because I've called and I can't get any answers to the question. You know, that particular fishing down there has been in this community for a lot of years, and I'd like to see something like that continue. I was thinking today when we were on the radio that I'm being a little provincial. I really think that we ought to be looking at all those lots along there where we have public access and public use along there that we've both used both in Petersburg for a long time. And that now it gets a considerable amount of use from the lodges and other people in town, brings economic benefit to us. But from my perspective, I really would like to see public access maintained down through there. And that's really was my big concern, trying to get it to, one, I was hoping that they would deal with us on that parcel or the other parcels, but apparently they don't even want to talk to us. But at least, excuse me, at least public access.
Through the mayor, the trust actually did answer that question on their handout for this part, which is the parcel is only accessible at this time by boat. And that seems to be the only answer they were willing to give to your concern. So I think there is a concern that access would be limited to by boat.
Yeah. So my question is then what does the assembly chose to do?
Will it even make a difference if we send a letter? Member Stanton Gregor?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's kind of a two-part, mainly parliamentary type question. So, and maybe the clerk or the manager knows, one, I'm sure I could look it up, but when does the bidding end? Since it's already out for bid and by all accounts, they are gonna carry that through. And two, if for the sake of argument, the assembly had interest in pursuing it, to imagine that would involve an executive session and a process like very similar to when the borough purchased those lots at Papke's by a closed bid. So just maybe for myself and those listening at home, walk me through the process. Somebody?
Mr. Mayor, I have some information on that. So the trust is accepting bids from September 13th through November 27th. That's when it closes. This will be done via sealed bids. The minimum bid is $102,500. And, they will accept bids up until, 10 a.m. of that day or on the 27th. So anyway, it's there's time if the Borough Assembly is interested in putting a bid in. You need to have another meeting for that. We couldn't cover it under this agenda item, but anyway, we could write a letter. They still haven't responded to the letter that, as Liz mentioned, that we sent earlier, and I'm not sure I expect them to respond. What she said to me, I wrote her an email to get this started this morning, basically outlining this is of interest due to subsistence and local recreational use and very important to the community. And then you heard me read her response, which was just kind of like, if you're interested, buy it. This is what it comes down to.
So we do have, go ahead, Member Marsh.
Thank you. A few things. I think the issue in my mind boils down to private property. Mental Health Trust owns this and can sell it as they wish. And I understand their goal is to make money. And they've set a minimum price. I do not think it is in the borough's best interest financially or otherwise to purchase it. Because we've got employees, we've got contract negotiations, we've got so many other things. There's no way we can afford it. It's not the borough's job, I believe, to solve everybody's problems. And change is hard. Change is really hard. Whether it's development, in my backyard, or whether it's a choice piece of property down at Blind Slough that hundreds of people have access to and have enjoyed it, including my own family, for many years. I wish it weren't so, that this property is up for sale, but we are a very resilient community, and I believe that we can get through this too. If somebody, locally wants to purchase it and open it up for public access, as long as, they own it and they can put it in a trust for in perpetuity, so be it. But I don't believe it is in the borough's best interest to either A, do a land swap, or B, purchase it. Thanks.
Okay, any more input on sending a letter? And from looking at the calendar, we have 2 assembly meetings, if I'm not mistaken, between now and the deadline of November 27th. So if an assembly member did want to put it on the agenda for an action item, it could be put on for, being involved in the bidding for it, but that's up to individual assembly members. So I guess the motion on the floor is to send a letter from Manager Giesbrecht, but it sounds like we already have. What's Member Feinwolf?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment. I wanted some clarification too. If I know Mental Health Trust is considering selling a number of properties in that area, and is it possible that if the borough were to acquire this piece, the parcels on either side of it would be sold and then access would be restricted because of the shape and kind of the nature of that piece of property? Access could be restricted because of the parcels on either side of it.
Member Lynn?
I looked at that. No, this particular parcel juts out, way out into that. The other parcels set back. The other parcels don't have the same restriction on access that this one does.
Okay, so I guess there's a motion on the floor, whether we want to offer a land swap, and it doesn't sound like with the mental health, the land trust, and it doesn't sound like they're interested. So we have a motion on the floor to vote to send them a letter, which we already have made communication. So is it a moot point, or should we call the roll?
Actually, I don't believe that the letter was ever part of the motion. The motion was just to approve Manager Giesbrecht to,
Okay,
right, and they basically shut that down. So I'm not sure that there's a reason to vote.
that's kind of where I'm coming from. I just wanted to know the feeling of the assembly, so. Okay, well, we've had a good discussion, like Member Newman.
Yeah, I'm looking at it on my iPad here, and I would like to add that even if we bought it, I don't think that that's going to really be helping our citizens from accessing the area. I believe like the majority of the people walking down there is at low tide, and oftentimes people walk below the property line, or they cross the stream to access the other side. So I'm not seeing access really being limited in any way. So I don't really see the benefit of purchasing this property. And I kind of tend to agree with Member Marsh on all the other things we have going on. So if I thought that there was a benefit to purchasing this property to increase the access to our citizens, I would be for it, but I don't. I think that even if a private entity or a private person buys this property and tries to restrict access, they're not going to stop the people from going down there to go fishing.
Yeah, I have to agree. Okay, well, communications, or any more input on this discussion? That's what it turned into being. Okay. We have communications listed from that we've received from October 5th, 2023. They're on our website. We don't read them at the meetings. And That brings us to assembly discussion items. Is there any assembly member comments this evening? Okay, seeing none. Any recognitions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We'll move.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned.
Too crazy, man. Yeah.